Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode is designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Well, hello, gentlemen. I have just returned, fresh off the boat, from a week in the jungles of Costa Rica, where I was working with the extremely powerful plant medicine of ayahuasca. And I had a chance to be a part of something really special, guys. I was a part of a team of people who brought a group of special forces, military combat veterans, right? These are the men who have seen some of the horrors of war. You're talking Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Recons, Silver Star recipients, which I believe is like the third highest Medal of Honor you can receive in battle. And these are men who have moderate and in some cases severe forms of PTSD that they've been carrying for years or even decades. Some of these men have lost limbs or have been debilitated, experienced injuries that will debilitate them for the rest of their lives. Men who have experienced guilt and shame for what they've seen or been a part of during their time in battle. And they went down as a part of a first of its kind research project, which I'll get into more detail a little bit later, to help some of these men heal from their extreme or moderate forms of PTSD. And one of the exciting parts of this, guys, is that a whole documentary crew was sent down. What was captured was nothing short of miraculous. And they're going to be taking this and hopefully they're going to be pitching this to Netflix and hopefully sell the series so that this message about the magical healing powers, the extraordinary healing powers of this plant medicine of ayahuasca can be brought into greater mainstream awareness. So on the heels of that trip, I thought that I would do a beginner's dive into ayahuasca, what it is, what you can expect to experience, how you plan for it, what a ceremony is like, the do's and the don'ts, who's ready for it, who's not. And my experiences in working with the medicine, because over the last 5 years, I've sat in about 20 ceremonies now, which by no means makes me an expert. I'm still very much novice when it comes to working with the plant medicine. There are plenty of people who have worked with it for hundreds of ceremonies, in some cases thousands of ceremonies. I could tell you a lot more about the medicine, who are a lot more scientific and knowledgeable than I am. But for many of you, I am probably the most well-practiced. And so I will share with you what I have learned in my 20 plus experiences, or around 20 experiences over the last 5 years. And I'll share with you some of the stories from my personal experience, but also what came out of this last week in the jungles of Costa Rica. So where to begin? I think the first place I'd like to begin is just letting you know why I'm referring to ayahuasca as a medicine. Because ayahuasca falls into this category of psychedelic drugs, which here in the United States are illegal. And some of these psychedelic drugs, like ayahuasca, MDMA, street name Molly or ecstasy, LSD, magic mushrooms, which I'm also a big fan of, and I'll be doing a series of episodes on that in a few short weeks. These are psychedelic medicines that are categorized as illegal drugs here in the United States, but most of which, all of which, are going through extraordinary research and trials, helping people, therapists that are going to be using it, helping people to navigate some of these forms of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, that we found that Western medicine and some of these prescription drugs are ill-equipped to help to deal with. And so I refer to these psychedelics as medicines because they actually help to heal in extremely potent ways when in the proper settings, with the proper mindset, with the proper guidance, the proper dosage. We'll talk about all of those things. And there are many studies that are happening at places like Johns Hopkins, especially with the medicines of MDMA and with magic mushrooms, to help heal people, especially like military veterans who, when they come back from war with all of this trauma and stress in their bodies and terrors, we just prescribe them dozens of medications. Guys, some of these military vets are on 30 plus medications that are just numbing out their systems. They can't even feel their lives anymore. They're a stranger to themselves and to their families. They're not even living a high quality of life. 21 military veterans per day commit suicide, which is an atrocity. And so the medicines or our ways of healing these kinds of extreme PTSD or moderate forms of PTSD are completely ineffective. And the Western medicine drugs, at the best, help to numb some of the feelings. They don't get at the root. And these psychedelic medicines help you get to the root of many of the issues, the problems, the traumas, the stresses. And in my case, the compulsions and the stories from my childhood and the anxiety and some of these things that have been buried, and just giving you a roadmap for why you are the way you are, why you do the things that you do. And so ayahuasca, in this particular case, that we're going to be talking about, I refer to as a medicine. And so do many of the people that are in the community who revere the power of this plant medicine. So ayahuasca is originated in the Amazon basin by the indigenous peoples of the Amazon basin, and primarily in the country of Peru, where it's most well known. And the practitioners of ayahuasca have been using it for centuries, or even maybe longer, millennia. And I think the research is kind of fuzzy there. And I just want you to know I'm not a historian. I'm certainly not as well versed as many others. You can probably read Tim Ferriss or do some Google searches out there. There's a lot more people who are more knowledgeable than I am. But to give you a baseline understanding, a beginner level understanding of what ayahuasca is, it's a plant medicine. It's turned into a brew. When you go into ceremony, you drink it from like a little cup, maybe think size of a Dixie cup or something, of maybe a shot glass or a little bit bigger. It tastes to some people like licorice. To me, it tastes nauseating. I disdain the taste of ayahuasca. It just doesn't go down very well for me. I'm getting kind of like nauseous just thinking about sipping it right now. And I'll get into some of the ceremonial aspects here in a minute, but I do want to take a step back and share with you how I came to the category of psychedelics. 5 years ago, when I left Prudential after 15 years and was going on my radical sabbatical to start traveling around the world, I actually, in the very last minute, was hooked up with going into a psychedelic, an ayahuasca ceremony. Because it's illegal here in the United States, you kind of have to know somebody who knows somebody to get you involved in one of these. And I'd been on the hunt for a couple of years to try and get into a ceremony, but I didn't know anyone. I wasn't a part of the communities where those doors would open readily for me. And the reason why I wanted to move into the psychedelic realm was I had been on a journey, I think for, about 6 years at that point, where I had read so many books, where I had hired so many gurus. I'd gone to so many different workshops. I learned so many different skills. I'd hired therapists and coaches. And all of that stuff was essential on my journey. But I wanted to cultivate a deeper relationship with my own inner compass, right? I wanted to learn what was going on deep inside of me that no one else could ever go to. They can't venture as far inside of me as I can. But I didn't have the tools or the skill sets. And these psychedelic medicines, the more that I read about them, have this extraordinary power of allowing you to go deeper inside of yourself, to become your own guide. Now, that was what was really appealing to me. And here's what I want to say for anybody who's at the beginning of their stages of either considering working with ayahuasca or one of these other medicines, is that I do not believe that someone who has not done an extensive amount of inner work already, whether it's working with a therapist, whether it's starting an awareness or a mindfulness practice, that you've worked with some form of getting at some of your either traumas, or if you haven't worked with a coach, if you haven't done that stuff first and you try to race right into psychedelics, I believe that's a recipe for disaster, because you don't know yourself well enough yet. And some of the things that you are going to see and experience on these journeys are going to be incredibly difficult for you to process if you don't have an awareness practice, if you don't have someone else to bounce this off of, if you don't have a trained therapist or a coach who's worked with these medicines, who knows how to help you to process these things. I've seen people go to psychedelics, have a bad trip, and spin out and be discombobulated for months. I've even had some bad trips on psychedelic medicines where it's taken me weeks or even in some cases months to unwind from a bad trip, even after having years of inner practice and structures like a mindfulness practice and coaches to help me process it. So you're talking about working with extremely potent medicines here, and I really want you to understand that so you can respect what you're stepping into. So I guess in summary on that one is, if you don't have a mindfulness practice, if you've not done any work with a therapist or a coach, if you don't have proper support structure, I don't think you're ready. I don't think you've done the work, the prerequisite work to step into the psychedelic arena. Other people may disagree, but this is if you're looking for my guidance on it, that's the stance I would take. Now, when working with any psychedelic medicine, there are 3 super important traits that you need to be aware of that contribute to the power or to the problems of your psychedelic experience. Those 3 categories are set, setting, dosage. Set, setting, dosage. Set means your mindset. What is the mindset that you are in as you are going into working with the medicine? Excuse me. So for example, if you are in a bad state of mind, if you're super anxious, if you're in a depressive state, if you're spun out, that's probably not the best time to be working with one of these medicines, because it could thrust you maybe deeper into one of those states. And that could be something that's really painful. That could be something that's very scary. So an intentional amount of work needs to be done before you step into any psychedelic experience. And when it comes to ayahuasca, especially for this trip that we just led a number of these military vets down to Costa Rica with, we took 2 months where I ran, I think it was 5 90-minute intention setting calls where the men had a chance to get to know one another, to take down the armor, to reveal and become vulnerable about some of the things that they were dealing with, so that they could get very clear on their intention before they came down to work with the medicine for the first time. These men, I think all to a man, were first timers. They had never worked with ayahuasca before. And so in those intention setting calls, these men started to reveal some of the things that they've been a part of in war, right? One of the men lost his brother who committed suicide after coming home from war. Another man had been sexually abused as a child, which is probably one of the things that led him to actually enlist in the service. We had a man who had lost his leg in war. Another man who had been, he had experienced some sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, but a debilitation that he's now walking around with a cane for the rest of his life. He may lose his leg at some point. These are the kinds of things that these men were dealing with, that as they brought it forward in their intention setting process to say, I want to work on these things when I get on the medicine. I'm scared, but I'm also ready to confront these things. They prepared their mindsets to work on that intention and to kind of like surrender to the power of the medicine to show them what the medicine wanted to show them. So the mindset is critical. The setting is, what is the physical environment, the physical and emotional environment that you're going to be in. We went down to the Soltara Healing Center in Costa Rica. It's legal in Costa Rica to do ayahuasca, so I'll link the Soltara Healing Center. It's a world-class environment, beautiful setup in the jungles of Costa Rica. The shamans and the support staff are second to none. I'd highly recommend it, especially for beginners. And so the physical setting was beautiful, but the emotional setting, right, where you trust the people who have worked with these medicines for many years of their lives. One of the shamans had been 30 years of working with the medicine. This man, his name is Amerigo, had spent 5 years in complete solitude, just eating very bland foods, giving up sexuality, living on his own, and communing with the medicines, right, so that he could learn how to work with them before coming back. So you're talking about, like, I'm in good hands, which also enhances your mindset, the set, right? So set and setting, and then dosage, right? Knowing the proper amount to take. And when you're working with ayahuasca, you're going to be working with a shaman who's been trained. Shamans with ayahuasca tend to work for, I think, like 8 to 10 years before they're allowed to really administer the medicine. at least in the cultures and the traditions that I've worked with. So there's, it's almost like, a medical degree that you need in working with the medicine and sitting through thousands of ceremonies and drinking the medicine thousands of times before you're allowed to hand it over to someone else. And so the dosage, they tend to look at you and ask you a couple questions. And then in some cases, I've had shamans don't let me participate in that at all. They'll just feel into me and give me the dosage. In others, they'll ask you what you feel like, and then they'll calibrate based on what you say and also their awareness, and then hand you the medicine. So that's the setting, and the dosage that are the most important. Intention setting, like we just talked about. So what to expect when you go to a ceremony? Typically, you're in a group setting of no more than 20 people. I believe there are plenty of other places that you can go to that maybe have more, maybe have less, but the most traditional form I've seen, and I've sat in 4 or 5 different environments, and they've all had about 20 people. That seem to be the max. There's typically at least one shaman, the one that's administering. In many cases, there are multiple shamans. And then also there should be a support staff, meaning there are 3 to 4 other people who are at the beck and call of the shamans to help people, the 20 participants, in the event that someone's purging, someone needs to go to the bathroom but can't get up, someone's having an episode, going through something difficult, that there are enough other people that are there, assistants and guides, that can help to shepherd someone who's going through a difficult time. That also, again, contributes to your ability to feel safe and surrendered. So when we're talking about drinking the medicine, you take a glass of the medicine like we talked about before. What to expect when you're going through the experience. So I laugh at that because you kind of have to expect the unexpected. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever drank alcohol before, and many of you probably have many times before, it's kind of the same experience. Like, you know what to expect. You drink and you get drunk. Your buzz feels pretty much the same every time. When you drink the medicine, you have no idea what you're going to get. You drink the medicine 1,000 times, it's going to be 1,000 different experiences. And any shaman or anybody who's practiced will tell you that. You have no idea whether you're going to get a physical experience where you're purging. You get a puke bucket, because many people purge and puke into the bucket. And purging is considered to be a great thing. Vomiting in this context is considered to be a cleansing. When you vomit on alcohol, it's usually something pretty nasty and disgusting, and it feels terrible, and it usually means you drank way too much. In the context of ayahuasca, you are purging something physical, emotional, spiritual, that no longer is serving you. And the medicine is said to have extremely powerful healing and cleansing properties. So it's actually quite celebrated. When you puke, it's a good thing. There are also other forms of purging, like you can get diarrhea. You could have laughing purges. Some people get into extreme bouts of laughter, crying and tears, snot running. These are all forms that you're releasing something that no longer serves you. So that's one of the things to expect during experience. It's usually a 5 to 7 hour ceremony where there's lots of singing. In some of the ceremonies I've sat in, there's been instruments that have played. The shamans sing. They sing what's called Icaros, which are these songs that have been divined from the plant medicine of ayahuasca itself. And they're said to kind of stimulate the same vibrations or to have a vibrational frequency in alignment with the medicine itself. So when these songs are sung, they kick up something inside of you as the medicine is working. And it can, unclog memories from your past that have been buried. It can cause you to purge. It can cause you to have blissful experiences. And the Icaros are sung all throughout the ceremony. In this case, down in Costa Rica, the 2 shaman, Amerigo, who's a man, and Olga, the woman, they sang for 6 hours, 7 hours without music, uninterrupted. It was an unbelievable sight to be experienced. I mean, they were just belting out without fatigue songs for 5, 6, 7 hours. It was extraordinary. And then when the experience is over, and I'll talk about some of the experiences that I've had so you can kind of get a sense for some of the journeys you can go on. So the ceremony is over. You go to sleep. These ceremonies happen at night after the lights have gone down, typically start around 7 or 8 p.m. They're over by 1, 2, or 3 a.m. Some ceremonies have, you eat snacks after you're done, and then, you go to bed. And the next morning, you wake up, and you tend to go into a sharing circle where everyone has a few minutes to talk about the experience that they had from the night before. One thing that I didn't mention is the preparation process leading up to the ayahuasca experience itself. I talked about the intention setting. I didn't talk about the physical preparation. So many people undergo what's called a dieta. And the dieta is the physical food that you eat leading up to the experience. Now, there's a wide range, if you do research on dietas, that range from extremely strict, like you can only eat bland foods, no salt, no sugar, no meats, all vegetarian. You're talking like potatoes and leaves of lettuce, to some things that are maybe a little bit more flexible, like, you can have some plants and you can have some fish, you can have some chicken, but like no pork, no red meat. And what I've been doing in leading up to the experience is I do a 5-day fast. I do the Prolon fast, which is a vegetarian fast, 800 calories a day to cleanse my system. Very little in terms of sugar, no sugar whatsoever, very little fat, no meat, to prepare myself. And the reason for this is they want your body to start to kind of kick up. We eat a lot of sugars, we eat a lot of meats, we eat a lot of these heavy foods to kind of suppress emotions, to help distract what we're feeling from. And when you take that away, that stuff starts to rise to the surface, and it makes it much more available to explore during the ceremonies. And some of that stuff will come up and be quite confronting, but it also allows it to be released. So the dieta is an intense part of the process. I don't enjoy it. I don't think very many people do. But if you want to prepare for it, that's probably one of the highest forms of preparation. Okay. And then the integration on the back end is the last thing I'll talk about before I get into some of the specific stories. The integration on the back end is extremely important. You come home from one of these experiences where maybe you've gone into some of the most deepest, darkest stuff of your life. Maybe you've realized the relationship that you're in is not the one that you're supposed to be in. Maybe you've had a grand vision for something that you're supposed to create in this world. Maybe you had this blissful experience where you got a chance to see the person or the people you love the most in your life from a different perspective that cracked your heart open to them. And now you got to bring that back into your real life. So the integration is super important, which means on the back end, you don't want to go right back into your normal everyday existence. You don't want to be thrust right back into work or the stresses of your life. Like, you actually want to plan on the back end of your trip to have a few days to land your plane easily, right? To land it softly so that you have some space to let this stuff take hold. It's kind of like if you plant a flower in the ground or plant a seed in the ground, you can't dig it up every day and be like, hey, is it growing? Is it growing? Like, you need to let it root in and grow before you can, start to move on from it. And you have to water it every day. You have to tend to it every day. Too many people jump right back from these psychedelic experiences into the craziness of their life and then, just basically steamroll that seed, that vulnerable seed that you've just planted. So the integration on the back end is important. And what many people will tell you is the insights and the experiences that you learned from over the course of that journey can take days, weeks, or even months to fully manifest. I'm not exaggerating, like months in some cases where you could go, oh my gosh, the seeds of what I just experienced now, the growth, the breakthrough, the aha moment were planted months and months ago. So that's the power of this medicine. Let me share with you my experiences and some of the things that I've seen. So like I've said, I've sat in about 20 ceremonies now, and ayahuasca is an extremely frustrating medicine for me to work with. And here's what I mean. For the 20 ceremonies that I've sat in, all 20 of them, actually, I could say this way, none of the 20 ceremonies that I've sat in has the medicine taken me beyond the physical realm. Meaning the 20 experiences have been just like nauseating, have been fatiguing. I've been tired, hard to stay awake. It's not been a pleasurable experience in all 20 of those ceremonies for me. And I've learned that I have to drink twice as much medicine as everyone else just to get kind of a similar or even watered down version of what they're getting in terms of potency. I'm not very sensitive to this medicine. There must be something inside, and I haven't figured out fully what it is. Maybe like an enzyme that breaks down the DMT, which is the real psychoactive ingredient, that for some people, they're really sensitive to it and can drink, a quarter of what I drink and blast off. For me, it's been very physical, and it's been very difficult in the ceremony itself, which lasts, like I said, 5 to 7 hours. Now, I've had 2 experiences after the ceremonies are over, when we're back like eating, where the medicine has kicked in, triggered by something that I've eaten, like grapes or something sugary, that for whatever reason catalyzes the DMT and it can send me into this blast-off space, that has caused experiences that have been transcendent for me, which keeps me coming back, even through what I would call a series of really disappointing journeys or really rough experiences. The first one is an experience I've spoken about on this podcast before, where I had a chance to experience my sister, Mary, at a whole different level. So to paint the picture for you, and I'll do this one quickly because I've spent time talking about this in other episodes. The 7-hour ceremony was over. We've broken our fast. We're eating because most on the day of, like you have your last meal around noon, and the ceremony ends at 2 a.m. So we're all starving. We're all eating around the kitchen. Everyone's going to sleep, and I'm eating these grapes. I'm the last one awake, and all of a sudden the medicine kicks in, and I run to the couch to sit down, and I go on this like psychedelic blast off, and I am now in my sister's body. I have a chance to experience my sister's heart, her beauty, her love, how she loves so freely, how she experiences joy, how she forgives people, how she is so enamored by life. And it was the most blissful, invigorating experience I'd ever had. It allowed me to understand the differences of my sister and I, because she's special needs, and how many years I spent not really understanding her or not taking an interest in her, but releasing the guilt I felt from that, the shame I felt about that. And then this beautiful love that I could see of us growing old together, and then my parents passing away, and how it would be beautiful for Mary and I to have our own relationship for many years of our lives, and the adventures we could go on. That experience was single-handedly one of the top 5 experiences of my life. All things, like top 5 experiences of my life. And that happened 3 or 4 years ago, where I understand my sister at a whole new level now, and my heart explodes every time I talk about her. And that experience has actually allowed me to open my heart to love and to be loved by all people in all walks of my life at a different level. So if I never have another experience of ayahuasca again that goes beyond the physical, it's still worth it, because it provided me one of the top 5 experiences of my life. You know what I'm saying? What would you pay? Like, what would you be willing to pay for a top 5 experience of your life that you'll never forget, that continues to pay dividends? So that's why, I work with the medicine. The second experience, and I've also talked about this in a previous episode as well, was during a medicinal experience. After the ceremony was over, I'm sitting in a room by myself. I'm eating a bag of Siete Fuego chips, which are like a healthy version of Doritos, very spicy. All the ceremonies are over. You're not allowed to eat spicy food, leading up to it. It's not recommended on the day after, but I'm eating something spicy, and the medicine kicks in, and I'm now gay. No joke. Like, in the experience, I was 100% gay. I had a chance to experience what gay sex would be like, what gay experiences romantically would be like, what intimacy would be like, what it would be to have sexual things done to me, to do sexual things to other men. And it was unbelievably beautiful. It was beautiful. Like, I can't explain this to you guys in any other way. If you've never been on ayahuasca, it was like not an intellectual understanding of being gay. I was gay. And I had a chance to see all these images and visuals, and I'm like, how come I haven't done this sooner? Like, this is unbelievable. But then it took a dark turn. Then it showed me coming back off the medicine and coming back into my real life and then having to explain, oh my gosh, I'm now gay. And what that would mean for my friendships and what that would mean for my identity and what that would mean for coming out. And I was terrified and devastated, and it shattered my identity. And it was like this, something that like it was dark and it was ugly and it was painful. And I had all these negative sentiments coming up, and it really rocked my shit to my core. And when the medicine finally subsided and I checked in with myself, I'm like, am I gay? And the answer was no. Like, I'm not gay. I don't have any sexual desires for men. And that left me, but I was really fucking wow. Like, I didn't understand why I had been shown being gay and why I had had such a darkness around this idea of having to come out, like if I had actually been gay. And what that helped me to see, and this is why I talk about, guys, at the very beginning, if you don't have a mindfulness practice, an awareness practice, when you have one of these experiences that really rock your shit, like you can chalk it up to just being a bad trip. For me, what I was able to see was that there was still some forms of latent homophobia that had been programmed into me as a guy growing up in the that's gay generation, where one of the worst things you could be as a kid was gay, and had to defend against it, and had to, make gay jokes about, others who were being gay. Like to not be seen as gay got into my system in a way that I hadn't even realized it had been rooted so deeply. And then it allowed me, this experience through ayahuasca, to see like how painful that had been for me, how that had kept men, gay men, at a distance from me. Because even though I always appreciate and love anyone's ability to be who they are, it had kept me at a distance, as an arm's length, from men who were gay, because on some level, the association with men who are gay may cause me to look gay. And can you believe that shit? Like how deeply rooted that was? And when I looked at my life and I saw the sparse existence of gay relationships in my life with gay men, it caused me to be really sad that I'd created this invisible barrier, because there was that latent homophobia that needed to be confronted. And this ayahuasca experience helped me to see that, helped me to see like how painful that had been for me. And since then, that dissolution has allowed me to establish and forge beautiful relationships with gay men in my life. And I talked about this with one of them on the podcast, Miles Spar. Dr. Miles came on and we talked about that. So these two experiences that I had on ayahuasca have changed and forever altered the course of my life in the most profoundly positive of ways. And I had a chance to see that with many of these military vets this past week, where so many of these guys who have been carrying around the guilt and the shame of their war, the guilt and shame of coming back and having to, kind of create this wall between themselves and their loved ones, because they can never fully talk about the things that they've seen or been a part of there. And they're always going to be othered in that respect. But how to kind of break down those walls and then come to peace with the men who they are and what they've done, and to create a new man going forward. Those were the things that we've worked on with them. That's the power and the possibility and the potential of this medicine. And I'll share one last story with you of one of the men in this group that we took down this past week. And I have permission to share all this stuff because it's been documented. And like I said, we're going to try and get it sold to Netflix so this message can hit larger groups of people. One of the most beautiful men that I met there this past weekend is a man named John Sargent. And he was a Marine. He was worked in the operations area of drones and drone strikes. And, some of the stuff that John was a part of there caused him to come home with so much anger and remorse that he became an alcoholic. And he has a wife and he has a daughter, both of whom he loves dearly. He split from his wife because she couldn't take him anymore. And then eventually they worked on getting back together. But he told the story that when he was on the medicine in Costa Rica, he could see in every experience that he had with his daughter, every meaningful experience, he had a drink in his hand. Every experience with his daughter. And it brought him to tears that she saw him with a drink every single time in his hand, that he couldn't be a part of her life without a drink in his hand. And so in the experience, he actually saw the shaman, Americo, come into his inner world like a samurai with a sword and chopping off and destroying all of the parts of him that were an alcoholic, like obliterating those compulsive needs, obliterating the anger underneath that caused the need for alcohol to numb it out and allowed him to actually release that anger. And then he said he saw the other shaman, Olga, come in with a broom and sweep up all those remnants to clean up his insides, to create shutters around him that were protecting him of those fears, of those angers that caused the alcoholism to come in the first place. And when he came back from that experience, he no longer wanted alcohol. He gave up alcohol. And he's very early on in his journey, right? And of course, like there are many people who have sworn off alcohol, and as time goes on, like the pull, becomes, so he's got his work to do. This is where the integration happens. But he made a commitment to give up on alcohol and to say it's not going to be a part of his life. And I had a chance to eat some meals with him in the days that followed, and he feels resolute. He feels like he's got a new lease on life, that he wants to create this as his new reality. That's the power of this medicine, the potential power of this medicine, guys, is that something that has been dogging him for years, or I think a decade or longer, is now something that can be gone after a week's worth of work. And so if you are considering working with ayahuasca, I hope that you've heard the full spectrum of what to expect, what the do's and the don'ts are, why I believe you're ready for it or when you're not ready for it quite yet, and some of the steps that you should be taking, like working with a therapist or reading books or starting a mindfulness practice before you get into some of these deeper, more potent medicines. And the fact that it's illegal here in the United States right now. There are underground places that I can turn some of the men who are close in my life onto, but I can't just, if I don't know you, if I don't know you well, if I don't know your intentions, I can't point you in those directions. And I certainly can't put at risk these circles who are putting their livelihoods at risk to administer these medicines because, like I said, it's still illegal. So you have to go to places like Peru or Costa Rica where it is legal, where you can go and get that work done. And I'm going to link the Soltara Healing Center in the show notes so that you can take a look at that, because I can recommend that as a place for you to go. And as always, I'll invite you over to the Facebook group for men, the Great Man Within Facebook group, to come in, to talk about the episode, to ask any questions that maybe went unanswered around ayahuasca or other psychedelics. So come to the Great Man Within Facebook group, and that's going to be linked in the show notes as well.